Well, with the Game Awards right around the corner, I thought I would squeeze one more video in here and thought I would talk about some fighting games. Now, I absolutely love fighting games. It's one of my favorite genres of games, and I've been playing fighting games pretty much from my gaming career inception. And even though fighting games in terms of their quality have gone very up and down, my love for them has gone nowhere. I still very much do love all types of fighting games. And it makes me happy that at the Game Awards, Geoff Keighley's big show, there is a Fighting Game of the Year award handed out every single year. They've never missed a year, no matter how questionable the best fighting games of that year were, they've always given an award out. And so for today's video, it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to be ranking every fighting game that is won Fighting Game of the Year from worst to best. That is from 2014 to now, and for this year I'm going to be predicting which game will win Fighting Game of the Year and ranking it accordingly. And you know how this goes, we'll be stacking them up against each other, seeing how it all plays out, and seeing what each game was up against. And of course I'll be sharing my thoughts, feelings, memories, etc. All of this is based off of my own personal experiences. And naturally, with a video like this, people are bound to disagree, so as always, let me know down below what your list would look like. I'm genuinely curious. But as always, any support is truly greatly appreciated. Seriously, thank you all so very much, and if you've been watching these Game Awards videos, I implore you to join me as I live stream the Game Awards tomorrow. Hopefully we see Half-Life 3 and Marvel vs. Capcom 4, we can only hope. Anyway, let's get to the games. What's the weakest of all of these games? Well, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the weakest fighting game of this list is Multiverses, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2022. And this shouldn't come as a surprise because Multiverses was actually delisted and no longer goes online, unfortunately. Despite being free to play, the game unfortunately just didn't make it, and Warner Brothers cut the cord on it, which really is a shame. This game just deserved so much better because the core fighting was actually pretty decent too, and it had a good character roster, with all the Warner characters coming to kick some ass. But when it won Fighting Game of the Year in 2022, it was way more hype. People were super excited about Multiverses, and it seemed like this was going to be a real competitor to Super Smash Bros. I remember tons of people were like, man, this is so much better than Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and it's like, well, which one can you actually get nowadays and still play? All I gotta say to that is yikes. The game is still technically playable. If you added it to your library before it was delisted, you can still load the game up and play in an offline mode, but you can't play online, you can't unlock anything, at least to my understanding. And there's just not really much you can actually do with the game anymore, which is a real shame. And again, if you didn't add it to your library before, well, you're just SOL here. So yeah, because of all of this, Multiverses is the weakest game to win Fighting Game of the Year kind of by default, since it virtually doesn't exist anymore. And the version that won Fighting Game of the Year most certainly does not exist anymore. They even shut the damn studio down, which is just horrible. But you know how this goes, we're also going to see what other fighting games were nominated, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on that. So Multiverses was up against DNF Duel, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures All-Star Battle R, King of Fighters 15, and Sifu. So the first one I'll address is Sifu. That very much is not a fighting game. I don't really know why it was nominated, but hey, it is a great game. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R is actually a re-release of a PS3 title, but it is a more than solid enough fighting game. DNF Duel, I actually don't really have much experience with this one. It seemed fine enough, but I just don't really know much about it. And then King of Fighters 15, in my opinion, this was the best fighting game that released this year, especially since Multiverses is gone, and is actually a pretty solid KOF. I'm not going to act like it's one of the very best. It doesn't go crazy like 2002, but there was some fun to be had here. But King of Fighters has always been pretty niche, so it, at least in my opinion, absolutely makes sense why Multiverses won. I just don't really like that it won. But anyway, that was then, this is now, the game is gone, and with it all my hopes and dreams. Okay, I certainly didn't put all my hopes and dreams into Multiverses of all games, hell no. So the next game we got here is Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2020. Now, I'll just say that 2020 was a pretty terrible year for fighting games. There really wasn't much to offer here, and Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition winning Fighting Game of the Year really highlights that. See, for the unfamiliar, Mortal Kombat 11 actually did not release in 2020. It came out a few years prior. This was an enhanced re-release. And yeah, it went home with the gold, and while I already have issues with that, if you look at what it was up against, it makes a bit more sense. MK11 Ultimate Edition was up against Grand Blue Fantasy vs. One Punch Man, A Hero Nobody Knows, Street Fighter V Champion Edition, and Under Night In-Birth EXE Late. Now 2 of those, Street Fighter V and Under Night, are actually also enhanced re-releases and didn't originally release in 2020. So if you look at just the original games, we have One Punch Man, A Hero Nobody Knows, and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. Honestly, I think Grand Blue Fantasy Versus should have won Fighting Game of the Year, and I don't even think it's that great of a fighting game, but it was really the only new one here. It wasn't forgettable as hell. I mean, One Punch Man, A Hero Nobody Knows is a pretty crummy arena fighter that I think everybody forgot about. I didn't hear like anybody talking about the One Punch Man game back when it came out, let alone nowadays, just completely fallen off the map. So yeah, should have been Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, but they went with Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I think Mortal Kombat 11 is just alright. It's the weakest of the modern MK games, and while it has a lot of things that I actually really like, including the story mode, the character roster, all of the fan service and love towards the older games, the presentation, the DLC that was really awesome. Unfortunately, where it matters most, you know, the fighting in the fighting game, I think this game is just alright. It's a little too slow for my liking, it's not combo heavy, and it's just not the most exciting a lot of the time. I don't care for the gimmick, and I don't care for the game's speed either, and unfortunately these are some of the most important things when it comes to a fighting game. And so with all of this, I've always thought that MK11, yeah, it's alright, but I'd recommend plenty of other Mortal Kombat games over MK11, which is why it's pretty much at the bottom here. I think when it comes to fighting games and Mortal Kombat, you could do a hell of a lot better than this. And so here we have 2025's Fighting Game of the Year. Now 2025 has obviously had a lot of amazing games, but I'll be real, when it comes to fighting games, it's been pretty bleak this year. And I think the fighting games that are nominated more than highlight that. So the nominees are 2XKO, Capcom Fighting Collection 2, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, and Virtua Fighter 5 Revo World Stage. Now, of those nominations, 3 of them are not actually new games. Capcom Fighting Collection is a wonderful collection of fighting games from the late PS1 to Dreamcast era. I wouldn't say this is Fighting Game of the Year, it's not even one game. And speaking of not even one game, we have Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, which is a great collection in terms of the games that it includes, but again, it's a bunch of re-releases. This can't possibly be Fighting Game of the Year. And then Virtua Fighter 5 Revo World Stage, yeah, it's cool that Virtua Fighter 5 really has come back, but it's also Virtua Fighter 5. I played this game almost 20 years ago. New version or not, it still is VF5 at the end of the day. Even though of these 5 choices, it's probably the best, I'm not going to say it's going to win Fighting Game of the Year because it's not even a new game. The 2 new games are 2XKO and Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. Now, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, I actually haven't played all that much of. Despite playing literally every single Fatal Fury and knowing all about Terry Bogard and a bunch of the characters, I just didn't have a lot of interest in City of the Wolves. I just didn't think it looked all that great, and after playing it for a bit, yeah, it's alright, it very much is Fatal Fury versus King of Fighters, but this has just never sat well with me. Maybe it's the odd characters being included, like Ronaldo, and everything to do with the Saudi Arabia government, or just my lack of interest in SNK at this point. But I think this game is just fine, and so with it being just fine, that leaves us with 2XKO, which hasn't even hit 1.0 and is my prediction to win Fighting Game of the Year. I don't love saying that, but that's my prediction, and that's what I've ranked here. 2XKO is a fine enough fighting game by Riot Games. It has a bunch of League of Legends characters. The roster is actually pretty cool, and it really is coming along together. It feels nice enough, and I absolutely think that there is a lot of potential for this. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's absolutely amazing or that you must go out and play it. I think it's pretty good where it's at, but it certainly could come a long way when it comes to characters, game modes, really just the entire experience being fleshed out in general, which is crazy because 2XKO has been in development for pretty long, and it's just kind of like, what have they been doing this whole time? That's a discussion for another day. I'm going with 2XKO. I haven't put a ton of time into this either, but I don't want to see an older game winning Fighting Game of the Year. I'd rather see something that, you know, actually came out in 2025, and between Fatal Fury City of the Wolves and 2XKO, yeah, we're going with 2XKO. What do you all think? Have I just absolutely lost my marbles? I would love to know. And so here we have Injustice 2, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2017. Now, Injustice 2 is a pretty good fighting game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's reached some of the heights of Mortal Kombat's best, but I think it's a more than capable alternative to Mortal Kombat by NetherRealm, and I hope that eventually they make an Injustice 3. What I always really liked about Injustice 2 was the story mode, the character roster, and just how sleek that entire presentation is. Like, this is a great looking game. Everything is super fluid. When it comes to the presentation, it really is second to none. I really enjoy the story mode, and I think the roster is actually really cool. As for the fighting, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's some of the absolute greatest fighting you've ever seen in a video game or anything like that, but I think that it more than gets the job done. But what was Injustice 2 up against? Well, it was up against ARMS, remember ARMS? It was up against Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Nidhogg 2, and Tekken 7. Now, to turn the clock back for a second, you gotta remember, this was 2017. The Switch was hot, it was new, and it was the shit. And ARMS actually had a fair amount of fanfare. I certainly had fun playing ARMS and played quite a bit of it myself. I wasn't absolutely blown away by it or anything like that, but I thought it was more than a fun time. It was actually a really fun time, especially with friends. Fighting game of the year though, yeah, I can see why this one didn't win. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, yeah, I absolutely see why this one didn't win. This is unfortunately the worst in the Marvel vs. Capcom series, and while it does actually do a number of things pretty well and it is very user-friendly, it just kind of shits the bed in a bunch of aspects that matter. And then we have Nidhogg 2, which I don't really have much experience with at all, so I just don't really have much to say there. And then we have Tekken 7. I have no idea how this didn't win Fighting Game of the Year. Tekken 7 is one of the greatest fighting games ever made. Like, I enjoy Injustice 2 and all that, but Tekken 7 is on another level. Tekken 7 just goes wild. Like, looking back, there are very few fighting games I enjoy or have played as much of as Tekken 7. I even enjoy it more than Tekken 8 now. Tekken 7 was just such a great game on every level. This totally should have won Fighting Game of the Year, but we're not in that timeline, so I'm just going to look at what we have versus what we don't. I think Tekken 7 is the superior fighting game and worth your time, but Injustice 2, hey, that's still a good one too. So the next game we have here is Street Fighter V, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2016. Now in 2016, Street Fighter V, let's be honest, it was in a pretty rough place. The launch to SF5 was pretty awful. While the fighting itself was pretty solid, the game was just severely lacking in any content. All you could really do was play online and do these little trials. Thankfully, throughout the years, they have actually added quite a bit more in really every aspect, and it's a much better game overall. It's actually a pretty decent fighting game. I think the fighting mechanics are solid, it feels nice, and the roster is all around pretty good. There's also arcade mode, which wasn't actually there when the game launched. There's a story mode, the online works. Yeah, this is sufficient enough. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's better than Street Fighter 4 or 6, it's certainly not, but it clearly has come a long way. Now, in 2016, there wasn't exactly a lot of fighting games to choose from. This was another one of those years where things were kinda dire. They didn't even nominate 5 games total, they only nominated 4. So the other 3 games that were nominated were Killer Instinct Season 3, Pokken Tournament, and King of Fighters 14. Now, Killer Instinct Season 3 being nominated is just kind of sad. That's just a DLC that adds characters. They were great characters, but this isn't even a new game. Shoot, forget being a new game, this isn't even a new re-release. It really is just a DLC with characters. King of Fighters 14, haven't really played much of this one. I like 15 more. It seems fine enough, but I do know that some people have issues with this one. And then Pokken Tournament, this is also a decent enough fighter, but I wouldn't say it's Fighting Game of the Year material. Not only do I remember it being wildly unbalanced, but I just didn't think that the overall fighting felt as good or flowed as nice as Tekken, which is clearly what it was inspired by. It was developed by that team. Like, if we're being real here, it doesn't hold a candle to really any Tekken game, but it was nominated and I respect it. But yeah, I can see why Street Fighter V won. Even with the botched launch, it is the clear winner here. So here we got Dragon Ball FighterZ, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2018. Now, Fighters is genuinely one of the best fighting games of the 2010s, and it's still being played competitively to this day. Dragon Ball fighting games have a historically long shelf life, and this game is no exception. It might have the longest shelf life of them all. Like, people legit are still pretty competitive about this one, and it was even at EVO as recent as like 2 years ago. And it is absolutely not hard to see why. Out of all the Dragon Ball games that have ever released, this game actually might be the best of them all. It has an amazing roster, probably the best of any Dragon Ball game, along with Sparking Zero, and then it has probably the best representation of Dragon Ball fights in a 2D setting. Like, the game looks, feels, and plays amazing. It absolutely has that Dragon Ball flair and feel to it, and then it has some really satisfying combos and just general fighting. It also has a lot of content to it as well, with a pretty extensive story mode, solid online. Yeah, this game really was the complete package, and when it comes to being fighting game of the year in 2018, not even close. It was hype then, and it's honestly still hype now, but what was it up against? It was up against BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, Soul Calibur 6, and Street Fighter V Arcade Edition. Yeah, there was only 4 games nominated, but even with there only being 4 games nominated, these are some heavy hitters when it comes to 2010's fighting games. Obviously, Street Fighter V Arcade Edition was just a re-release of Street Fighter V, it shouldn't have even been in there. But BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, another game by Arc System Works, is another excellent fighting game. It's got a stellar roster and some of the best fighting of the entire BlazBlue series. I know a lot of the diehards don't really care for it, as this one's more casual or normie or whatever, but I really enjoy this. And then Soul Calibur 6, this game goes hard. This is like the best Soul Calibur that is not Soul Calibur 2. It actually has a lot of content, the character roster is good, and the fighting is the best that it's been since Soul Calibur 2. For years, I've wanted to do a Soul Calibur ranking. Hopefully one day I do, but when I do Soul Calibur 6, it's going to be near the top of that list because it's actually really good. But all of these, yeah, they don't hold a candle to Fighter Z. Fighters really is just that good of a game, and I think the right game won here, and it still slaps all these years later. It's totally worth your time. So here's another Mortal Kombat with Mortal Kombat X, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2015. Now, Mortal Kombat X is legitimately one of, if not the very best Mortal Kombat game of them all. When it comes to the modern games, it probably is the best. It's up there with MK9. It has a more than solid enough story that kind of recreates MK4, but has a fun twist on it. It has oodles of content, the character roster is pretty good, and then the fighting is probably the best fighting the series has ever seen. It's fast, frantic, there's a lot of combos, and there's not a bunch of annoying gimmicks thrown in here. There is a few little gimmicks, like the few different types you can choose between, with your moveset kind of getting split up, which I've never been a fan of, but the actual fighting itself, yes, it is good, it feels nice, and I don't think Mortal Kombat really has ever gotten any better than this. It's either this or 9 when it comes to the fighting, and I still actually quite enjoy it to this day. But when you see what Mortal Kombat X was up against, yeah, it wasn't even close. 2015, it was another one of those dire years where there was pretty much nothing. This was back when fighting games had not been fully resurrected to the point like they are today, where the fighting game community is still pretty healthy. So MKX was against Guilty Gear Xrd Sign, which is a more than solid enough Guilty Gear. In fact, a lot of people actually would say that that still is the best Guilty Gear. I disagree, but I think this is actually a pretty decent fighting game, and it was the only one that actually could give Mortal Kombat X a run for its money. The other two, Rise of the Incarnates and Rising Thunder, have both been delisted and essentially cancelled. There's nothing here to really play. Now, in 2015, I didn't try either of these games. I didn't try Guilty Gear Xrd Sign until much later, so I can't speak on where all of these games were in 2015, except for MKX, where, yeah, it was very healthy. It was actually thriving even, and I'm pretty sure that it's like the best-selling Mortal Kombat game in the entire series. People absolutely loved MKX. It's not hard to see why. The right game was absolutely chosen here, and all these years later, I'm still kind of yearning for how hype MKX and really just Mortal Kombat in general was. I feel like Mortal Kombat hasn't been on this level in quite a long time, and who knows how long it'll be before it's ever at this level again. But MKX, that's a good one. And so here we have Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2014. Now, I love Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. It's easily my most played Wii U game along with Hyrule Warriors, and I think that it is overall one of the better Smash games. And I feel like it's easy to forget that because Ultimate just kind of blew this game out of the water, and I don't think I ever heard like anybody talk about Smash for Wii U again. And I mean, it makes sense. Ultimate has basically everything from the Wii U game outside of a game mode or two, and then of course has so much more. But you gotta remember that this was a huge step up from Brawl. I think the fighting in this game is way better than Super Smash Bros. Brawl. The character roster is absolutely on point, and it was connected to the 3DS game, and that doesn't really mean anything anymore. The 3DS game was just kind of whatever. The Wii U game was always the main attraction here, and I think it's a whole lot of fun. There's plenty of content and things to do in this game, and it's still fun even nowadays. I still obviously would recommend Smash Ultimate over this, but hey, it's cool that this won Fighting Game of the Year, right? Well, let's see what it was up against. It was up against Killer Instinct Season 2, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, Ultra Street Fighter 4, and then unsurprisingly, Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS. Now, obviously, the Wii U game is a lot better than the 3DS game. The 3DS Smash Bros. Is fine enough, but yeah, not even close. Killer Instinct Season 2, I'll say the same thing about it that I said for Season 3. This isn't like a new game, this isn't a re-release, no, it's just more characters and I think some balancing. But hey, at least there were some cool characters being added here. Ultra Street Fighter 4 is also not a new fighting game. This was just another re-release of Street Fighter 4. Now don't get it twisted, Street Fighter 4 is an amazing fighting game, it's a great game overall, and it's really one of the games that resurrected the entire genre, but this was like the third re-release of the game. And then we have Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, which is not just a re-release of Persona 4 Arena. This actually does add quite a bit more to it, and I would say it's pretty much its own game, and it's actually some real competition for Smash for Wii U. This is a more than solid enough fighter. It has its own story that's actually pretty good in its own right, and then the fighting feels nice too. Look, it's not going to give, say, Guilty Gear Strive a run for its money as being the best anime fighter of them all, but for the time, this was actually considered pretty great, and even nowadays, I think there's more than enough reason to actually try it out. And I know that it's even been re-released. I'm also kind of surprised we never saw a Persona 5 fighting game whatsoever. Either way, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, this is another good one, but I think the right game won here with Smash for Wii U. So here we have 2024's fighting game of the year with Tekken 8. Now, I very much remember when Tekken 8 released last year, the same day as Infinite Wealth, and while I might enjoy Infinite Wealth more, I can confidently say that Tekken 8 is also a pretty swell game. And when it launched, I was having a whole lot of fun with it, and it seemed like a pretty clear improvement on Tekken 7. Yes, there were some changes and they want you to be a lot more aggressive, but all in all, I still really enjoyed it, and I still think that it is one of the very best Tekken games. Fast forward about 2 years though, and the game is not in the same light that it once was. There's been a lot of updates that have really changed things, and while some have been for the better, a lot of them have unfortunately been for the worse, to the point where I feel like this game isn't going to rank as high as it should, thanks to a lot of these changes. And if we're being 100 here, I actually prefer Tekken 7 now. I've gone back and I do think Tekken 7 is like the best Tekken game of them all, but Tekken 8 absolutely can get there. I think the game can pull its head out of its ass and fix some of the issues that it has, rework some of the balancing, and stop being so damn greedy with all these microtransactions. Just cut this shit out, man. But even with all of this, it still wasn't even close for me that Tekken 8 was the best fighting game of 2024, and overall one of my favorite games of 2024. Since again, I really enjoyed it for what it was. But what was it up against? Well, it was up against Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising, the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, Arcade Classics, and Multiverses. Yeah, last year was actually pretty decent for fighting games. Now, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, I think that this is a perfectly fine game. I know it's been one of my hotter takes over the last year or so, but I've actually never been that big on Sparking Zero. To tell you the truth, I've actually never even seen Dragon Ball before. I only know about the story and the characters through the video games, and so all these deep cuts in Sparking Zero I feel like flew over my head, and the actual fighting itself was more than fine enough. Like, it was pretty hype, and there's a lot of crazy shit that goes on in this game, but I'm not gonna act like that it's about as shallow as a puddle for the most part. But hey, at least there was a lot of content to this, you can't deny that. Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising is the follow-up to the previous Grand Blue fighting game, and I think it's way better than the first one. It feels better, the roster's better, there's just a lot more going on here. And there's actually a fair amount of content. This would have easily been my runner-up for last year. If Tekken 8 wasn't going to win, I'd say it's this. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics is one of the greatest collections I've ever seen for anything, but Fighting Game of the Year, no, it's a collection of older fighting games, so I'm not counting that. And then Multiverses, yeah, what was Fighting Game of the Year a few years prior wouldn't even really be in the conversation for Best Fighting Game of 2024. It was just not in the place that it was before, not just in terms of where the game was at, but popularity and hype for it was like at an all-time low. I mean, obviously now it's the all-time low, there's literally nothing. But yeah, we don't need to drag the Multiverses carcass out again and explain it all. I think the right game won here. I think Tekken 8 is still really great, and I think a lot of people might be shitting on it, rightfully so, but there still is absolutely a good game in here, and there's still a lot of fun to be had, and there's still plenty of good things about it as well. Yeah, I'll be a Tekken 8 defender, but I don't care. I enjoyed it. So in the number 3 spot, we have Guilty Gear Strive, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2021. Now, I very much remember when Strive was announced and released, there was actually a lot of hype around this, more so than any other Guilty Gear game. This is easily the most popular Guilty Gear game of them all. It's the most accessible and arguably the best one too. I know die-hard Guilty Gear fans might not agree, but I very much think that this is the best of the entire franchise, and it's not hard to see why. The game looks just absolutely amazing. It's one of the most beautiful fighting games you'll ever see, and it just looks cool as hell, and it also feels amazing too. Like, this feels great. This feels better than any other Guilty Gear in my opinion. It's super smooth and fluid, and pulling off combos has never felt this good. I think the character roster is more than solid enough, and then the game actually does have some content to it. The story mode is, well, it's really just a visual novel, but at least there's plenty of other things to do here, and the online was actually pretty good as well. The game is still getting updates all these years later, and it is the primary Guilty Gear game. It's still one of the premier FGC games, and that's because it still is hella good all these years later, and it wasn't even close. This was easily the best fighting game of 2021. Like, this was just a landslide. But in transparency's sake, what else was it up against? It was up against the Demon Slayer Arena Fighter, Melty Blood Type Lumina, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. As I brought up a few times, Virtua Fighter 5 is not new. It came out on the PS3, and this was just another version of it. It's still a good game, but wasn't a new one. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, it's easy to forget just how much hype was behind this, but a lot of people were actually really excited about it, and while I think that it was a bit disappointing if we're being honest here, and that the second game really was what the first game should have been, there still is some fun to be had here, and it has arguably the better roster between the two. It's a shame though that it very much was lacking on the budget in just about every single area. Melty Blood Type Lumina, this is a pretty good anime fighter. I haven't played a ton of Melty Blood, but this was easily the biggest release for the entire franchise. It didn't feel like we were playing these games in the bathroom anymore. We were actually, out on the stage, and I know it's even made it to EVO a few times, in an official capacity, I might add. And then the Demon Slayer Arena Fighter, yeah, I don't really have much to say about this. I've never seen Demon Slayer. This seems like a perfectly fine arena fighter, and I believe a second one just released here in 2025 as well, so there must have been something to this, but I'm not going to act like I know what that is. Either way, yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter how good or not good these games were, it wasn't even close. Guilty Gear Strive is just one of the best fighting games to ever be made, and it's arguably the best fighting game of the 2020s. And if it's not Strive, well, it's Street Fighter 6, which won Fighting Game of the Year in 2023. This was another one of those where, in my opinion, it just wasn't even close. Street Fighter 5 is just a phenomenal game. It is, in my opinion, the best fighting game of the 2020s. It's maybe the best Street Fighter game of them all. Like, it's actually really good, and it's just such a massive upgrade over Street Fighter V in every way imaginable. The fighting feels amazing, it flows incredibly well, it's incredibly accessible, they want everybody to try it. The game has so much content to it. The online is as close to flawless as it gets. The roster actually started out really great, and it's only gotten better and better throughout the years. Like, Street Fighter 6, when it comes to fighting games, is one of the GOATs immediately. It looks great, plays great, feels great, has an amazing soundtrack. No, it is just fire through and through. This game is straight gas. And it didn't really matter what else came out that year. There was no way any other fighting game was going to even come close to Street Fighter 6's quality. But there were plenty of other fighting games that came out that year. There was God of Rock, Mortal Kombat 1, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, and Pocket Bravery. Now, I'm gonna just be 100 with you all. I've actually never played God of Rock or Pocket Bravery. I don't really know much about either of these games, and I really sincerely doubt they are as fire as Street Fighter 6. Like, there's just no way, and they didn't win either. Mortal Kombat 1, I actually do have a fair amount of experience with this one, and while I think it's better than Mortal Kombat 11, that's not really saying a whole lot. I think the game is good, but it could have been a lot better. And here we are just 2 years later, and Mortal Kombat 1 is pretty much abandoned at this point, not just by players, but by Warner Brothers as well. The game sold like crazy when it launched, and then that was it. A lot of people didn't really latch onto it like Warner Brothers thought that they would. There was a good amount of content in this game, and the story I actually do enjoy. I like how different it is. They tried something really out there. I don't know if it really succeeded, but I can appreciate that they tried. And the fighting was more in line with MKX, and I enjoyed it more than 11's. Still, I didn't like the partner mechanic. I just don't want any gimmicks at all, and yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it didn't win Fighting Game of the Year. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, That's a good one too. It's what we wanted from the first one. And I think it's a perfectly fine alternative to Super Smash Bros. When it comes to platform fighters, I think it's probably the best that isn't Smash. It's way better than Multiverses in my opinion. There's a ton of fan service, good roster, and there's actually a good amount of content. Unfortunately though, like 2 years later, this game is pretty much also dead. All of this really reaffirms what I already knew. Street Fighter 6 is one of the GOATs, baby. Not even close. And then here we have it, my number one pick, the top fighting game that's won Fighting Game of the Year, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. In my opinion, yeah, this really is the GOAT. It doesn't get any better. This is, in my opinion, like the best fighting game ever made. Obviously, this game is very different from most fighting games. It is not a traditional 2D fighter in any sense. It is a platform fighter, but man, this game's just so unbelievably good. All these years later, it's still hella good too. And I have just absolutely no idea how this could ever be topped if we're being real. And yes, I know some people immediately go, man, this game's online is dog shit. Yeah, the online isn't perfect, but you know what else is? Pretty much everything else. Like, the game just goes absolutely nuts. It has the best character roster of any fighting game. Even pre-DLC it was really good, but post-DLC, oh, it just goes foolish. It goes wild, and I still just cannot believe how good this roster is all these years later. All the fan favorites here. Really, everyone is here. That was the main marketing, was that everyone was here. There's all these third-party characters. Like, no, the roster, we could be here all day talking about how good that is. We could absolutely glaze the roster to death. The stages are also amazing. They have like everything here. They have a few new ones that are pretty good too, but they got like all the old ones. It's all been remade. The soundtrack is just something crazy. The game looks nice. It runs super well. And then the fighting, ooh, the fighting is the best the series has ever seen. It feels amazing. It plays amazing. It's pretty balanced for the most part. Well, at least compared to other Smash Bros. Games, and I have very few bad things to say about it. The game has an ass load of content as well, more than like any fighting game in recent memory. And it's just one of those games that I have absolutely no problem giving my highest recommendation. That illustrious 10 out of 10 must play. And if you have a Switch, I believe it is one of those must-own titles. But it wasn't the only fighting game to actually come out in 2019. In fact, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate didn't even come out in 2019. It came out in 2018, but it came out at the very end and wasn't included in 2018's Game of the Year awards. So here it was, and it rightfully won. But it was up against Dead or Alive 6, Jump Force, Mortal Kombat 11, and Samurai Showdown. Yeah, 2019 was actually a pretty good time for fighting games. Dead or Alive 6 is one of the better games in the entire series. I feel like it's not talked about all that much nowadays, but I enjoy Dead or Alive 6. It's fun. Jump Force, yeah, this one sucks, unfortunately. It's pretty much been abandoned at this point. It's been delisted. You have to go find the disc if you even want to play it nowadays, and yeah, it really was nothing special. Mortal Kombat 11, we've already discussed that. And then Samurai Showdown. I actually love Samurai Showdown. This would be my runner-up for sure. This is like the best of the entire series, and it was actually a real return to form for this franchise. Like, the Samurai Showdown reboot is excellent. I got nothing but good things to say about it. It felt amazing, it had a great roster, and it looked nice too. Overall, this was a good year for fighters, but Super Smash Bros. Ultimate really is the king. It really is at the top of the castle. It's got the crown. I don't really know what I'm saying at this point. I'm just kind of rambling, so we're going to end it there. Let me know what your favorite fighting games are. I would absolutely love to know. Let's get a discussion going, and yeah, I'll see you all in the next video, which will be probably something post Game Awards 2025 related. Either way, see y'all later. Bye-bye.